Sonic heaven, if you ask me.
Move so fast, even more when I'm caught not looking. Stuck in distraction, what am I doing? I don't wanna be here, so you know I'm gonna leave. Better off true outcast on my own, call it disconnected. Only I know what's best, and it's not loving a pixelated fantasy. Digital love got me lost, selling my heart at what cost? Drowning in a pixel river, got a jailbreak out of this, never stops. Getting out my own way, breaking superficial. Rather be alone if the love is artificial. Better off lost in my dreams, till I'm making my reality. Reverie scaring me out of my mind, flow in the ocean all of the time. Don't see it, then we might not vibe. I've been feeling so different lately. Flying through life, feeling unfold. Trying to hold on, but losing control. Thinking, where does this go? Don't know, but I guess I'm gonna find out.
Music just never stops amazing me. It's such a special thing. Yo, welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I'm going to take you through a pop trap track that I put together over this last few days. Thanks for checking out the video, and I hope you find this content valuable, and if you do, you know what to do. Alright, let's just dive into the breakdown. So the beat itself is very simple, and that's a key element. It's not supposed to overcomplicate. It's just a strong kick, snare, and hat loop. And the hats just literally repeat apart from one or two little rolls. And that's it. It doesn't need anything else. And then I just threw in some little reverse shakers. Just add a bit of shimmer and a bit of movement. If I bring back in what I had added originally, it didn't add to it, and so I then just decided I didn't need it. So for those, it was definitely keep it simple, stupid. That's something I see very often in this genre, trap pop, where the focus is usually on the vocals, the melodies. The drums just literally need to have crisp samples and be strong and bold, alongside a heavy, relatively thick, but not too distorted 808. I have a tiny little bit of wave shaper. I haven't really done much to it, just pushed up slightly for a small amount of saturation. And then I have an 808 pattern when the drums aren't even there, and that drives a lot of the build up in the verses. And again, I just kept it super simple. I didn't want it to be a distraction or have loads of slides. I just wanted it to be creating a nice thick floor for the atmosphere. I did sidechain the kick to the bass, but I haven't done it very aggressively. It's not that noticeable, it just allows the kick a little bit of headroom to cut through. So in those verse sections here, the 808 pattern is really simple. In the chorus section, there's a bit more movement and energy, and in this third section is where the chord progression changes, and then it just goes back to being simple again. The next obvious element is in the choruses. I added this guitar from either side. I found a sample of a guitar doing that. I also tried recording my own guitar, but I didn't want to spend long enough making it sound as good as I wanted it to. This guitar tone was almost too warm and upbeat, so I want to explore recording my own guitar more in the future, but I just wanted to get the idea down. I just found this simple guitar loop here. So there's two samples, and I just pitch them up and down depending on whichever note they need to be, and they both have slightly different texture. That's the dry sound. but it was just a bit too full and thick, so I did some EQ and then added a bit more compression and distortion. So you can see the chain here. If I turn it back on, but I turn these effects off. I turned on the wave shaper. That just gives it some grit, and then turned on the EQ just to remove some of the low end. And then just boost some of the frequencies that I wanted to be more audible, and then cut some of the frequencies that were getting in the way of the vocal. And then just added 2 different compressors. Just makes it a bit more full. Then added like a sidechain gate on gross beat. Just so that it's got that kind of pulse, but I didn't want it to be too aggressive. And then just made the angle a little less harsh. And then also here, instead of having it on full, because it's just a little bit too obvious, so just pull it down a little bit. It just gives it that pulse and movement, which goes really well with the 808. Then added hardcore. But I only have the distortion and the noise gate turned on, and of course I have it only turned to half here. Just to keep some of the thickness or fullness of the guitar there. And then just sent it to the reverb and delays. All the effects are bussed together here, and the main sound is here, and then I just added a little bit more EQ. Because if I take that up, it was just a little bit too bright. Just wanted to tame it a little bit, and then I also have a kick sidechain there as well, so that when you pair together the 808 and the kick, hey, there you go. That is the foundation of the track. Then onto the instrument, then onto the synths and instruments. There's a range of things that I did. I found a sample within Arcade. Sounds like that, and I thought, wow, that's actually a very nice sample. The thing I've been struggling with Arcade so far is that the sounds are so full and complete that it's hard to pair them in with other things, because they can actually be kind of overpowering. So I pitched it up an octave. And then threw some pretty significant reverb on a little channel beside it. So if I take all the effects off, and it's a really cool sound, but I knew I would need to tame it down a little bit because there's so much going on. I turned the effects back on, I put a pretty significant EQ on it, and then also some Panomatic just so that it moves from side to side, and then just a little bit of compression because, as you can see in the waveform, this note, without the effects and compression, it can be really loud, but I still wanted some of that dynamic, so just controlled it with a compressor. So all of that just makes it a bit smoother. Then I can turn the drive volume down here. I've just got an automation on this Fruity Balance, so that it's mostly the reverb and delay. I could then use those effects, like the reverb and the delay, to print out little reverse sounds like this. That's just one of my favorite things to do, is adding a really luscious reverb and delay and then removing the dry signal to see what it gives you. It's such a beautiful sound, and there's so much that you can now do with that effect, and then can automate the dry and wet sound up and down. And then within the verses, I can pull that dry signal right down so that it's just ambiently floating or flying away in the back. It made me think of like an eagle flying or soaring away in the distance, and I'll dive into that a little bit more when I talk about the lyrics. I found another atmospheric sound within Arcade. And also added a pan to that sound. But then sent it to here with another big reverb on it, and then Valhalla Supermassive, and then some pretty harsh EQ, because if I take these off, to give you an example about what the sounds, the original sounds from arcade often end up being. This sample is huge, like thick and full all the way across the frequency spectrum, and that's great, but it's really hard to mix anything else alongside it without doing some serious taming of that sound. So I essentially just cut out a lot of the low end, boosted some of the frequencies that I liked, but then panned it across from side to side so that it wasn't just this wall of sound taking up all of the space that the other elements, particularly the vocal, would have needed. And then it's the same on the reverb, so threw quite a lot of reverb on it, but then an aggressive low cut, and then just boosting the higher frequencies. Then within Vital, I designed this sort of organ pad. Which is great, but I just knew that it was going to be competing with the vocal and the other elements, so just decided to EQ it as much as was needed. I just used Panamatic again just to create a bit of movement in that sound. That's something that can be really helpful if you're making pads and atmospheres, is to pan the sounds a little bit from side to side. It can just make the track flow a little bit more. And I didn't actually need to use the sidechain in gross beat because most of that was being taken care of by these LFOs. It's pretty simple, it's just 3 different sine waves. One of them is pitched up 24 and has 3 voices of unison. And then they all have a low attack. That's what gives it that smoothness. And then I just make the LFO for the filters pulse up and down. But that sound, when you pair it with the 808, is just delightful. Then when you pair that with the other instrument sounds, the other synths, sonic heaven, if you ask me. Now, I have that predominantly in the verses, whereas in the choruses, I cut it right back because the guitars take over and I want there to be more energy. So I keep the lead sound, but I fade the dry level up and down so that it's not overpowering all the way through. The last elements of the instrumental are just adding some little effects. But I wanted it to fade away pretty quickly because I don't want this to be like a crazy EDM track where there's just white noise going for ages. I just wanted it to work as a really nice transition.
It's not loving a pixelated fantasy. Digital.
The only other cool sound effect I added in, I took out my MIDI controller and it made it made that sound, and so I just recorded that but pitched it up too so that it was in the same key as the track, and luckily it was pretty close. I didn't have to pitch it up a crazy amount, so I think it tied in pretty well. And then I also ducked the instruments and the effects there so that it almost sounded like there was a hard sidechain,
Connected. Only I.
so that you can hear the instruments here, they duck right down just to make space for it. I wanted that to almost be jarring because it's supposed to be, and it ties in really well with the lyrics. And speaking of the lyrics, the last element, of course, were the vocals. And the vocals are actually something that I spent probably the most time on. I really liked where the instrumental was going and I wanted to try and make something meaningful for it. And I just, like I say, write the lyrics in here. And I was thinking about the fact that It's crazy how fast life can fly by, especially if you're not paying attention to it. And I just think that there are so many distractions out there now for us in the world of the internet. It's easy, so easy to get yourself into a trap where you're just looking at what everyone else is doing and imagining living someone else's life rather than actually chasing your own goals and dreams. Even though I'm very disciplined and I try to keep focused on all this kind of stuff, I just wanted to make a track just to really emphasize the fact that I just think it's so much better to get lost in making your own life and developing your own dreams. And the very first lyric, I went for a walk with my dad and brother. We went up a hill and there was this massive eagle just floating in the sky, and it just made me think, oh, I have to try and feature that into the track somehow, because it was almost like you can either get sucked into the social media vortex or you can follow the call to chase the best version of yourself, and that's what I guess I'm trying to do every day. Also, the sound effect after putting it through the processing to me just sounded like some sort of electronic eagle.
Better off true outcast on my own, call it disconnected.
And that lyric, true outcast on my own, call it disconnected. I just think there's almost like a pressure now that you have to be on every social media platform and you have to show up every day and be posting on these things constantly every day. But I actually think that if you're just investing in yourself, in your skills, your creativity, your connection to people in real life, and the things that you love, that to me is true connectivity. So if by not being on social media every day I am disconnected, then so be it. That's cool with me. You can probably figure out what the rest of the lyrics mean. But when it came to processing the vocals, there were a lot of sibilant S's, T's, F's in this.
Digital love got me lost, selling my heart at what cost? Drowning in a pixel river, got a jailbreak out, all this never stops.
So I had to be really aggressive by cutting up lots of them, ducking them, and just turning the S's down, making them separate before even running them through the vocal chain. So first thing I'm running them through is a de-esser, but I don't want the de-essers to be doing too much because then it can make the whole thing sound really weird. So running it through a de-esser, then running it through an EQ just to cut out some of the low end and some resonant frequencies, and they're quite aggressive. And so I just cut out some of those and then just ran them through several different forms of compression. So fruity compressor, and then within virtual mix rack I have another EQ which isn't doing too much, and then two different compressors. But I have the mix of this monster compressor turned down because I don't want it to, like, if you turn it right up it's far too aggressive. I'll dive more into vocal stuff and how I process the vocals, but generally speaking this is my chain. It's just de-esser, EQ, lots of different compression, and then some saturation, and then another little bit of compression with the Orvox. Then I send that to each of these different reverbs here, and I can choose between them, and I have that for my lead. And then I created this vocal pad here with just a bunch of layers. But I had to be really careful to turn the balance, the drive volume of this down completely. So I have an automation clip here. So in certain sections, like over here, I turn it right down, so all you can really hear is the reverb of that. And then I also have a high cut on the pad because I didn't want it to be too overwhelming. So and then generally within the vocal effects, I have a vocal effects automation here just to duck so that it cuts off and I've got good control.
Oh, I'm gonna leave. Better off true outcast on my own, call it disconnected. Only I know what's best, and it's not love and a pixelated fantasy. Digital love got me lost, selling my heart.
There you go, that was everything. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you found it valuable, again, you know what to do. If you have any questions or want me to talk about anything else in the videos, leave a comment down below or send me a message on my Instagram. I would love to hear from you. I really look forward to sharing the next video with you, and you can probably click on one of those right now. But until then, believe in yourself and you will be unstoppable. Bye.
Pixelated fantasy. Digital love got me lost, selling my heart at what cost?